The violent pursuit of an absolute moral baseline is a psychological trap that ancient thinkers called the tyranny of unyielding virtue. You have been conditioned to believe that moral progress is a linear ascent, a clean ladder where every step upward makes you inherently more resilient. This is a lethal misunderstanding of the human psyche. When you attempt to convert the fluid, chaotic reality of human existence into a rigid, geometric grid of flawless ethical execution, you do not achieve enlightenment. You build a fragile glass cage. The moment the world shifts, the glass shatters and the shards cut deepest into the person who built it. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private journals to celebrate his flawless triumphs. He wrote them because he was terrified of his own hidden capacity for self-righteous rot. He understood that the most dangerous man in Rome was not the open hedonist or the corrupt politician, but the man who believed his own virtue was completely beyond question. True psychological resilience requires a calculated tolerance for internal friction. Look at the architectural engineering of the ancient world. The Romans did not build their massive aqueducts out of solid, monolithic blocks of unyielding granite. They used arches that allowed for slight movement, settling, and thermal expansion under the blazing Italian sun. If those structures had been entirely rigid, the pressure of the flowing water would have cracked them within a decade. Your mind operates under the exact same structural laws. When you deny yourself the capacity for strategic compromise, you eliminate your psychological suspension system. You become a brittle mechanism that snaps under the first unexpected impact of systemic betrayal or personal failure. The ancient Stoics called this the art of the reserve clause. They never said, "I will do this perfectly." They said, "I will attempt this if nothing happens to prevent me." This tiny semantic shift is not an excuse for laziness. It is an engineering blueprint for a mind that can bend without breaking. Consider the hidden feedback loops of modern behavioral economics, specifically the phenomenon known as moral licensing. When a person forces themselves to exhibit an extreme, unnatural level of restraint or ethical purity in one area of their life, the brain treats that effort as a currency. It accumulates a psychological surplus. Subconsciously, the mind begins to demand a payout. This is why the most outwardly dogmatic individuals so often collapse into spectacular, hypocritical ruin behind closed doors. The extreme pressure of their public or internal persona forces the shadow side of their psychology into a tight, pressurized corner. Eventually, the valve fails. The Stoic approach to this problem is radically different. It does not demand the immediate, violent eradication of every flawed impulse. Instead, it demands a cold, objective auditing of your current capacity. You must view your mind not as a temple to be kept perfectly sterile, but as a complex chemical reactor that requires constant, active pressure management. When you demand absolute moral perfection from yourself, you automatically project that impossible standard onto everyone around you. This creates a state of chronic, low-grade hostility. You become an analytical prosecutor, constantly scanning your friends, colleagues, and family members for microscopic deviations from your arbitrary code. This is not leadership. It is a desperate defense mechanism designed to distract you from your own internal instability. Epictetus warned his students against this exact pathology. He told them that the moment you begin to pride yourself on your ability to judge the moral state of others, you have abandoned your own philosophy. You have traded the internal work of self-mastery for the cheap, addictive dopamine hit of moral superiority. The truly disciplined mind is ruthless with its own internal processes, but exceptionally gentle with the external world. It treats the flaws of others as natural phenomena, like a sudden rainstorm or a rocky path, rather than personal insults that require a grand philosophical response. The concept of the hyperpure ego is a direct driver of cognitive fatigue. Every time you make a decision based on maintaining your perfect image rather than solving the practical problem in front of you, you burn valuable mental energy. You are playing a high-stakes game of chess against an imaginary opponent. Look at the historical data regarding the fall of the Roman Republic. The politicians who insisted on absolute, uncompromising ideological purity were the ones who ultimately paralyzed the Senate, creating the exact vacuum that Julius Caesar filled with his dictatorship. Their inability to negotiate, to see the world as a shifting web of compromised realities, destroyed the very institution they claimed to protect. You are doing the exact same thing to your personal life. By refusing to engage with the messy, imperfect compromises of daily execution, you isolate yourself in a sterile tower of high ideals. You become completely useless in a crisis, because crises are inherently messy, unfair, and chaotic. To break this cycle, you must implement the concept of voluntary ethical friction. This does not mean compromising your core human decency. It means intentionally dismantling your need to feel completely blameless. It means accepting that in a complex, interconnected global economy, every choice you make will have an unintended, slightly imperfect consequence. The clothes you wear, the technology you use, the investments you make, all of them are tied to systems that are fundamentally flawed. The pursuit of total innocence in such a world is an infantile fantasy. The mature Stoic accepts their complicity in the human condition. They do not paralyze themselves trying to find the completely spotless path. Instead, they look for the path of maximum utility and maximum resilience. They choose to be effective rather than pure. They understand that a bruised soldier who stays in the fight is infinitely more valuable than a pristine spectator who watches safely from the hills. We see this exact tension mirrored in modern systems engineering and software development. When programmers try to write a piece of code that accounts for every single theoretical edge case perfectly from day one, they end up with a bloated, unexecutable system that crashes under its own weight. This is known as over-engineering. The most resilient systems are built on the principle of graceful degradation. They are designed with the explicit understanding that components will fail, inputs will be corrupted, and external networks will go offline. The system survives because it knows exactly how to drop non-essential functions while keeping its core engine running. Your psychological architecture must adopt the principle of graceful degradation. When you experience a massive emotional shock, a career setback, or a personal betrayal, your goal should not be to maintain a stoic, unmoving facade. Your goal must be to protect the core engine, your sanity, your basic agency, your immediate duty, while letting the less critical elements of your ideal self-image fall away without regret. This requires a total rejection of the performative self. In the modern digital landscape, the pressure to broadcast a pristine, highly curated moral identity is at an all-time high. Algorithms reward absolute certainty and punish nuance. If you feed this monster, you become its slave. You begin to monitor your thoughts not for their truth value, but for their alignment with the collective orthodoxy of your chosen group. Marcus Aurelius faced a massive version of this temptation. As emperor, he was surrounded by a court that constantly demanded he play the part of a living god, a flawless monument of imperial perfection. His journals show a man actively fighting against that trap. He repeatedly reminds himself that he is just a human being, a lump of clay, a biological entity that will soon return to the dirt. He used these brutal, reductionist meditations to strip away the gold leaf and the purple dye from his self-image. He wanted to see his naked reality, flaws and all, because he knew that only a naked mind can accurately sense the shifts in its environment. When you strip away the illusion of your own exceptional moral purity, something incredible happens. You regain your strategic speed. You no longer waste time agonizing over whether a specific action makes you look bad or conflicts with your established brand. You ask a much simpler, far more potent question. What does this situation actually demand? If the situation demands that you have an uncomfortable, messy confrontation where you might be misjudged, you do it. If it demands that you pivot your strategy and abandon a project you previously swore to protect, you abandon it. Your identity is no longer an antique porcelain vase that you must carry through a crowded market without a single scratch. It becomes a rough block of iron that can take 1,000 hammer blows and simply grow more dense. This is the shift from fragile moralism to weaponized adaptability. It is the core secret of the ancient masters, and it is the only way to survive a world that has no respect for your neat little rules. Let us look deeper into the mechanics of self-deception that drive this obsession with a flawless image. The psychological root of this condition is a profound fear of your own internal chaos. You know deep down that your thoughts are messy, that your motivations are often mixed, and that your desires can be contradictory. Instead of doing the hard, terrifying work of integration, what modern depth psychology calls integrating the shadow, you attempt to build a thick wall of external perfection to contain the mess. You become a jailer to your own mind. You think that if you can just control every word that leaves your mouth, every dollar you spend, and every minute on your calendar, you can prove to yourself that the chaos inside doesn't exist. This is a catastrophic miscalculation. The more you suppress the natural, chaotic fluctuations of your internal state, the more power they gather in the subconscious dark. The ancient Stoic Chrysippus illustrated this with his famous analogy of the rolling stone. If you push a cylindrical stone down a steep hill, the initial push is your choice, but the way the stone rolls depends entirely on its shape and the rough terrain of the hill. You cannot control every bounce, every spin, or every trajectory once the motion has begun. Many people try to live their lives as if they can run alongside the stone, manually correcting its path every single inch of the way. They exhaust themselves, tripping over the rocks, screaming at the terrain, all to maintain the illusion that the descent is perfectly controlled. The true philosopher focuses entirely on the initial push and the internal shape of the stone itself. They accept that once the action enters the physical world, it will collide with the messy realities of human nature, economics, and luck. They do not take the random bounces of the stone as a personal indictment of their character. This brings us to the necessity of structural margin. In engineering, structural margin is the system's capacity to handle loads far beyond what is expected in normal operations. A bridge is not built to hold just the average weight of commuter traffic. It is built to hold 5 times that weight during an earthquake while being battered by high winds. Most people design their moral and psychological lives with zero margin. They commit to a schedule that requires them to be at peak performance 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. They commit to an ethical code that allows for no bad days, no moments of exhaustion, and no errors in judgment. When the inevitable psychological earthquake hits, a family emergency, a sudden illness, a financial collapse, they have no structural margin to absorb the blow. Their perfect image collapses instantly into total burnout and cynical despair. To build structural margin into your psychology, you must become comfortable with the concept of optimal imperfection. This is a term lifted directly from modern manufacturing and statistical quality control. In a high-volume factory, aiming for 0 defects is often a path to financial bankruptcy. The cost of eliminating the final 0.01% of defects is exponentially higher than the cost of fixing the occasional error down the line. The most efficient factories determine an optimal defect rate, a baseline of acceptable variation that allows the system to maintain high speed and maximum throughput. You must establish an optimal defect rate for your own life. You must accept that a certain percentage of your daily actions, your emotional reactions, and your interactions with others will be imperfect. This is not a license to be reckless. It is a calculated strategy to preserve your limited cognitive capital for the things that actually matter. Consider how this applies to high-pressure decision-making. When you are in a leadership position, whether running a company, a household, or a military unit, you rarely have access to perfect information. Every choice you make carries an inherent risk of collateral damage or unforeseen negative outcomes. If you are paralyzed by the need to make a perfectly clean, blameless decision, you will delay until the opportunity passes entirely. In the ancient world, this was known as the sin of omission through hesitation. The Stoics recognized that failing to act out of fear of making a mistake is itself a massive moral failure. Marcus Aurelius frequently faced situations where every available option carried a significant cost in human life or political stability. He did not have the luxury of keeping his hands clean. He had to choose the least destructive path, execute it with absolute resolve, and then carry the psychological weight of that choice without whining. The obsession with a spotless reputation is also an act of supreme arrogance. It assumes that you have the power to control the perceptions of other people. Let us look at this through a cold, analytical lens. The human brain is a massive pattern recognition machine that interprets reality through a thick lens of personal bias, past trauma, and tribal loyalty. When someone looks at you, they do not see you as you actually are. They see a projection constructed out of their own psychological history. You can behave with absolute kindness, total honesty, and complete transparency, and someone will still interpret your actions as manipulative, arrogant, or hostile. Trying to manage that process is like trying to catch the smoke from a fire with your bare hands. It is an exercise in total futility that strips away your autonomy and hands it over to the most unstable people around you. Epictetus made this one of the foundational pillars of his discourse. He divided the universe into two distinct categories: the things that are up to us and the things that are not up to us. Your reputation, your image, and the opinions of others belong entirely to the second category. The moment you cross that line and try to force the external world to validate your internal sense of virtue, you become a slave. You are no longer acting out of a genuine desire to do good. You are acting out of a desperate need to be seen doing good. This shifts your internal locus of control from a solid, unmoving rock to a chaotic, unpredictable ocean. The true Stoic finds their total satisfaction within the boundary of their own reasoned choice. If they know their intent was clean and their execution was disciplined, the external result, whether praise, execution, exile, or applause, is completely irrelevant to their core value. This mindset shift is what separates the amateur philosopher from the hardened practitioner. The amateur views philosophy as a set of rules to be memorized and followed like a textbook recipe. The practitioner views philosophy as a martial art. In a real fight, you do not maintain a beautiful, pristine stance. You get hit in the face, your vision blurs, you taste blood, and you are forced to fight from the ground in the mud. The goal is not to look elegant. The goal is to survive and secure the objective. If you carry a brittle, textbook definition of virtue into the arena of modern life, you will be knocked out in the very first round. You must develop a dynamic, fluid understanding of your principles, one that knows how to adapt to the terrain without losing its foundational integrity. Look at how this plays out in the realm of interpersonal relationships. The person who is obsessed with being a perfect friend, a perfect partner, or a perfect leader is almost always an insufferable presence over the long term, because they cannot tolerate their own flaws. They cannot tolerate the flaws of anyone else. They become hypercritical, passive-aggressive, and emotionally distant. They treat every minor disagreement or human error as a catastrophic breach of their idealized contract. This behavior is fundamentally a form of deep emotional cowardice. It is a way to avoid the messy, vulnerable, and often painful work of real human connection, which requires us to step into the mud with another person, accept their broken pieces, and allow them to see ours. We see a powerful parallel to this in the field of evolutionary biology. Species that adapt too perfectly to a highly specific, stable environment are often the first to go extinct when that environment undergoes a sudden shift. This is known as overspecialization. The creatures that survive major extinction events are almost always the generalists, the messy, opportunistic omnivores that can eat a wide variety of foods, tolerate extreme temperature fluctuations, and survive in fragmented habitats. They aren't the fastest, the strongest, or the most beautiful, but they are incredibly difficult to kill. Your psychological profile must be that of an evolutionary generalist. You must be able to function in a high-stakes boardroom, a chaotic crisis room, a cold, solitary room, or a messy family room. If you can only operate when the conditions match your exact ethical and aesthetic specifications, you are an endangered species waiting for its climate to change. The ultimate resolution of this tension lies in the concept of the integrated self. This is where Stoicism meets the frontiers of modern cognitive science. Integration means looking directly into the dark, chaotic, and imperfect corners of your mind, and acknowledging them as part of your internal ecosystem. It means understanding that your capacity for anger can be transformed into disciplined resolve. Your capacity for fear can be converted into hypervigilant preparation. Your capacity for ambition can be harnessed to build institutions that protect the vulnerable. You stop trying to amputate parts of your humanity in a desperate attempt to look like a clean, white marble statue. Instead, you become a master craftsman who knows how to use every single raw material at his disposal, no matter how rough or ugly it might appear in its raw state. When you walk out into the world with this mindset, the weight of the world lifts off your shoulders. You no longer care if someone misinterprets your actions. You no longer care if you make a mistake, provided you learn from it instantly and adapt your strategy. You stop policing your thoughts with the frantic energy of a dictator and start directing them with the calm, steady hand of an experienced general. You accept that life is a long, chaotic campaign filled with bad weather, logistical failures, and tactical retreats. The goal is not to return home with a spotless uniform and a perfect record. The goal is to win the war for your own mind, to remain sovereign in the face of absolute chaos, and to leave the arena knowing that you fought with everything you had, exactly as you were.